We're back again, Mel.
You again?
Yeah, me again.
Haven't you got anything better to do, Wendy?
It's becoming a habit, isn't it?
It's a little bit, it's a bit addictive, can't it? This.
So, our subject today is about
Let's talk
sex.
about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things sex can be. Let's talk about
Sex.
sex. I couldn't
Yeah.
resist.
No, it's got to be done. It's got to be done because that
Any
is a
singing
real
coaches? Comments in the comments, please.
yes. Yes. All the comments, please. We want comments. We want you to
Yeah,
tell us what it's all about. Even if you put an yeah, anonymous, it's fine. We just want to.
yeah.
So we were talking. We said that so many clients we work with, they don't like talking about sex.
Yeah. You don't like talking about sex, and it's it feels so sad and such a shame because and shame is often what's going on here, isn't it? How we're raised to not talk about sex. It's dirty. It we not supposed to be having sex, or it could be cultural, it could be religious, it could be that you're living together and you're not married. There's all kinds of stuff, isn't there, around sex and who's got the highest sex drive and what kind of we should be able to talk about sex, like, are we having Indian or Chinese or Mexican for dinner, and what kind of sex do we like? Fast sex, slow sex, quickie sex, sex outside. Yeah, we're not, people aren't talking about it. Yeah.
No, they're not, and it is so taboo, like religion and money, and I mean, it's just one of those other things that we just don't talk about, and it we might it's it people will maybe they'll talk about they having sex,
Mm.
but they won't talk. I get couples that won't even talk to each other about what they're enjoying, how they feel about it, what's good about it, as you say, what's in the song, what's bad about it.
Yeah.
Um, Couples that only have sex if they're drunk. There are couples that just don't have sex at all, and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I have no sex for X number of years," but
Yeah, no
they
one's talking
just
about it. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
it's a dirty word. And it's, oh, well, thinking about it, it was something very much around when I was growing up. Lay back and think of England.
Oh,
Women weren't
wow.
allowed to feel they could enjoy it.
Yeah.
Guys, it's a badge of honor. Women, it's sluttish if you have too
Oh,
much
the
sex.
double standards about, yeah, who are you sleeping with? Yeah. Oh, it's conquest for a man, and yeah, women are around allowed to have multiple sexual partners. Yeah, the kind of the sexism around men and women, and women don't enjoy sex, or they've always got jokes about they've always got a headache, and actually, it's not strictly the case, is it?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, it's really sad. I mean, where do we start with this? Because we can go on for ages, can't we?
I
But
know we said
where
this
do we
might be a
start?
mini series, mightn't it? Should we start with
Yeah,
some
it's just
themes that we notice, like long, maybe, I guess when people get together in relationships, there may be more sex because all the hormones are going, and then actually as we kind of settle into relationships, much longer relationships, either people can't be bothered, the sex has gone off the boil, and the intimacy too. I think this is not just about sex, it's about intimacy, isn't it? It's like, do we still hold hands? Do we still hug? Are we still close in our bodies? Or are you both on different ends of the sofa, or even in different rooms, that there's no intimacy? It's more than sex, it's intimacy.
yeah,
And
yeah.
actually you can be intimate with somebody that you don't have sex with. Like, I can still hug you, still hold your hand, or yeah, so the kind of the lack of intimacy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's as you say, when you start in a relationship, you can't get enough of each other because all the endorphins are going mad, and
I
all
think that's the right that goes for healthy relationships where there is some sexual chemistry, but it's not always the case, is it? Because we can have relationships where the chemistry is not there,
Yeah.
and so it may be a bit forced, or maybe there is something in history like sexual abuse where it takes me a really long time to feel safe and be able to have sex with you. If we've got kind of males or females who have sexual histories, or there's been maybe a lot of maybe unsafety in kind of domestic violence relationships, then actually it may not start off in a bonfire of kind of passion and intimacy. It may not start that way, and it may never be that way.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, and I think the messages that we get from parents or caregivers or you know and maybe at school. I mean, if parents don't talk about it to their kids, then they learn from the playground, and
yeah,
therefore they often get the wrong stories told them. Like you can't get pregnant uh, if you're standing up or something.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
all of those kind of messages that go around, and I don't know what I think they talk about the mechanics of sex in schools nowadays. They don't talk about the emotional bit of it. It's well, that's what a man does, that's what a woman does, and that's it. But how about the rest of it? How about all the feelings that come into it? How about, as you said, the intimacy of touching and erogenous zones?
yeah. We're not. I think. I think it's changed over the years, hasn't it? If you, what I'm seeing is, and we can't talk about sex without talking about pornography.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah,
Yeah. And so actually what we're seeing is, the language is changing, banging somebody. Yeah, it's the crude language of sex. And actually it's about hooking up, it's about a quick physical act. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's your thing. But actually, yeah, for some people they will maybe want an emotional connection. They want love. We don't hear anything about making love anymore, do we? It's all hookups and quick sex. And so, yeah, sex within relationships or sex out of relationships, fuck buddies, the culture of um, who we're having sex with and why we're having sex is changing.
yeah,
It's changed over the years, and also what we're seeing in pornography isn't helpful for women, certainly, because actually, I had a client recently who's dating, and she says, "I'm not a fucking porn star." Yeah, I don't,
yeah,
I don't want to be treated like that. These women aren't enjoying what they're doing, and so actually, this is porn for men, and yeah, and so we're. And it's not that women don't use porn, but probably they have a different taste to what men do, and so yeah, these kind of the language around sex has changed, and why we're having sex has possibly changed. And what's really interesting as well, I was watching a TED talk a while back about the younger generations, kind of teenagers and stuff. And one of the women who'd done a survey with young women was that they had two things, major themes, and one was that it doesn't hurt, and the second was that nobody finds out about it. I mean, what a horrible, kind of, I don't even know the word, theme, pattern, to be hearing that this is people's kind of benchmark, or teenagers' benchmark for sex, that it doesn't hurt, no one finds out about it, that we can't own that if we're having sex, and that it's pleasurable.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. I'd agree, and I think going back to the porn bit, I think what so many people, men and women, they're not appreciating that is entertainment.
yeah,
The porn movies, that's not real. So what you're talking about, women being treated like they're just sex objects, I agree.
yeah,
But men have this attitude they've got to have a constant erectile penis that will last for hours.
yeah,
So where does that leave either gender in that situation? And I think there's a sense of performance. It's got to be like this. It's got to be hard. It's got to be long. It's got to be like this. And that's you're just taking something that said entertainment and saying this is what sex is.
yeah. Maybe it's not about with how much we're having, but what the quality is like as well. Should we talk about things that get in the way, that kill sex drives and get in the way that we see? So we talked about erectile dysfunction, not being
Yeah.
able to get an erection for
Yeah.
men. And we also, I think, one of the big things I see is anger. If you're, it's almost like an invisible anger wall. So if you're pissed off with somebody, if you're resentful, if the relationship's not good, then I might not, I don't find you sexy. I don't want to have sex with you. I'm pissed. I don't like you in this moment. And so
Yeah.
that doesn't necessarily anger's not an aphrodisiac. Yeah. Yeah.
No, no. I think there's the anger, and there's also the um power. I don't like you and you're not having it. I'm going to
Yeah.
use it as a weapon. And I see that a lot. You think that you think I'm going to give you sex. I'm going to please you after the way you spoke to me, or because you didn't do this. And I see a lot of that as well,
Yeah.
which
I
is
also see couples who um, I often want to know who's initiating the sex. Yeah. And actually nobody is, because I no longer feel that you desire me. So I'm not asking why we're not, I'm not talking about why we're not having sex. And actually, so yeah, and actually the other person also is not initiated. So one person may have been initiating and has stopped, or and the other person hasn't initiated. So you can get if couples that the fear of rejection and that you no longer want me means that we're not talking about it. No one's initiating sex.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not going to initiate it, I'm not going to initiate it.
Yeah.
That battle again, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
that fear of rejection. Well, if things didn't go the way they, for a man, if he doesn't get an erection, then he can feel, I can't do this again because you're going to judge me. I might, what's wrong with me? So those kind of feelings come up for a guy. And I guess for a woman, I'm not turned on. I'm not feeling moist, to put it
Yeah.
that way, and therefore there's something wrong with me, or I don't want to, I'm scared, it's hurting, all those things, but it never gets talked about. It's
No,
just that
we don't
withdrawal.
talk about it. We don't talk about creating erotic space in relationships. So if you're too, I think there's so much to this. If you're too close, in terms of you're on top of each other, I think one of the big ones I see, and this is hard to describe, but if a relationship has become platonic, what often is happening is if our emotional need, if we're not meeting our emotional needs, haven't been met, and you kind of got an adult child playing out. So if you've got somebody who's quite needy in terms of needing to be looked after, then it becomes a bit parent and child. So it's kind of like, if I have to keep looking after you all the time, and I see
Yeah,
you as a person to look after, then I don't see you as a person to have sex with that I want to fuck. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Or even if it becomes platonic, you hear them say it's more like boyfriend, but brother and sister. Well,
yeah.
I'm not going to have sex with my sibling. That's the other block,
They've
isn't it?
lost that erotic kind of space, where we fancy each other, where actually if he meets his needs and your needs are met, or maybe a same-sex couple, if we've met both of our needs here, then and I don't have to take care of you so much, I'm not your caregiver or caretaker, then actually that leaves us in a space where we can have fun, we can enjoy each other's bodies, and we're not having to kind of, it's the biggest I think turn off is that kind of when somebody's needs haven't been met. It's really hard to explain, but I know what's going on in my own head. That yeah, it's kind of like I remember being very direct with a couple and saying, actually, she's your wife is you treat your wife like your mother, and actually, if she's got to pick up your pants and your socks, she's not going to want to give you a blowjob. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And the opposite way round, if you know, if you're constantly having to look after your partner all the
Yeah,
time, you know, the other way around, or the same sex, then actually I don't fancy you anymore. Interestingly, I think we can experience different aspects of our partners at different times. So I love Esther, you know, we love Esther's, we're both Esther fans, Esther Prowl. And some of Esther's work is really interesting in this area because you know, I've learned a lot from her, and she actually says, you know, to be able to experience different aspects of each other. So when my in lockdown, when my husband got a gruesome stubble, yeah, I was like, oh, hello, a different
yeah,
aspect of this person arrives, and different possibilities, because suddenly you've got, you know, you've got it's like you've got somebody else here, yeah.
yeah,
So it sparks up something, yeah.
yeah,
And often power can also be sexy. So actually, I went to see my it was actually at a funeral, and actually, my partner was in his suit, and he was all dressed up, and he was on the stage talking, and I was actually in this moment, I'm like, you know, when someone's in their full power, when they're confident, yeah,
that can be
and
very
you don't have to take care of them in that moment, that you know they're fully in their power, that it's sexy, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah,
fancy you, it's sexy now, yeah. So we have these Esther there's a podcast episode of one of Esther's kind of couple sessions, that where should we begin, and I always get couples, you know, maybe go and have a listen to it, because actually, again, this couple are talking, and she was like, when do you find him sexy, yeah. And she said he was bilingual and he spoke French, and she said when he's speaking French, he's not the kind of guy who cuts the lawn and moans about stuff. When he's talking French, I've got a different experience of him, and I find that sexy. So, you
yeah.
know, yeah, what do we find? It's almost sexy, is a lot, a bit edgy. It's kind of,
Oh,
yeah, that kind of
definitely,
edginess.
definitely.
We
Yeah.
hear that, oh, he's too nice or she's too nice. And so we want a bit of, there might be a need for that bit of edginess. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there is, because that's what attracts you, isn't it? In the first place,
Yeah.
it is that I'm not quite sure about this relationship. I'm not quite sure if he really likes me. I'm not quite sure. You don't get that settled feeling. And I think when couples get into that routine state and they just don't bother anymore, I mean, I'm not saying you've got to dress up for each other all the time. That's kind of, but it's definitely, if he's wearing a grubby t-shirt and an old pair of tracky bottoms that are all saggy, and there's nothing attractive about that. And the same for a woman, if she can't be bothered and she's just slobbing around and hasn't washed her hair, or you know, then I'm not saying we've got to dress up in sexy clothes. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about that, but actually appearing attractive. Because when you first met, there's no way you would have dressed like that.
No.
No
I
way.
also I also think if the relationship's gone off course, then it doesn't matter what you wear. Yeah. It doesn't matter how stunning you are, it doesn't matter what you wear. If somebody's pissed off and they're not talking about like the stuff underneath,
Oh
then
yeah,
we don't get to intimacy. And the flirting's gone. You know, being able to flirt with your partner. I think there are all these little kind of things that happen in relationships that we kind of miss. Like, you might be doing the dishes, and if your guy comes up behind you and like gets a bit flirty, we're like, oh, not now, I'm doing the dishes. And actually,
yeah,
here's a flirtatious kind of like, oh, I want you moment. It might be in the supermarket when some, you know, maybe there's a cheeky pinching of your bum or something, you know. So there might be all these cheeky ways that we might be trying to initiate something that I either get slammed down or missed.
yeah. What I hear is, you just grope me,
Oh,
and women
interesting.
say that. You just grope me. You don't notice me. You're not loving me. You're not caring about me.
Yeah,
You're just groping me, and I don't like being groped. I feel
yeah,
like I'm being sexually objectified.
yeah,
And I think that is, and I said, well, hang on, men quite often show love through their bodies.
yeah,
But I guess they're missing out on the fact that women, they need that emotional bit. They need that court. I'm going to use that really old-fashioned word. I don't know how else to do it. War, wooing, courting. They need,
well,
yeah,
let's use a more modern one, foreplay. Yeah, and foreplay
Yeah,
starts in the brain. It starts in
yeah,
our imagination. And actually, we know that men's anatomy is that they can get revved up. They might be able to get revved up very quickly. Women are wired very differently. Most women might say, actually, he started something and I wasn't really in the mood. But actually, as we go on, actually, women's desire switches on in a different way. We
yeah.
can also start the erotic space much earlier. It might be flirting. Foreplay can start days before sex. It doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
just a quick,
And,
it
and
could be quickie sex, but it could be, foreplay is so many things like dancing.
it's anything you could think of about paying attention to
Yeah,
each other. That's what it is. I love Esther Perel's. She was asked once, when should you start foreplay? And her reply was, straight after the last orgasm.
yeah,
And it's foreplay. People think it's just a fumble or touching or that kind of groping kind of view, or just the touching the genitals, but it's not. It's also
no.
noticing each other. I love your eyes. Look, oh God, you've got a gorgeous bum. I love it when you smile like that. It's those things that get
Yeah.
lost, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it can be even, it doesn't have to be about any of that. It could be that we're in a conversation that is sparking, this energy is there, playful
Yes.
energy or serious energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that, and in the mundaneness, how do people are like, oh, we don't want to schedule sex. We might not be in the mood, but how do you schedule time for each other, whether it's for massage, whether it's to have a bath, whatever it is. How do you schedule some time out from the kids if you've got them, or busy work schedules? If you don't create time for that erotic space, and you're on top of each other. If you've been
Mm.
away, then you may miss your partner. So I think relationships, there's this almost need to have a sense of, to balance a sense of safety and security with also the freedom and adventure. And it's that tightrope walk in relationships that kind of either makes it work or not. We hear that I don't have enough space, I feel suffocated, person's always too needy, or that person's too avoidant, and I don't know
Mm.
where are you. So there's all these kind of this stuff going on that gets in the way. And
And it doesn't
interestingly,
get communicated, does it?
Esther says you don't. She was used to think that if you fix the relationship, you fix the sex, but actually she's changed. She actually reversed it and actually said, I think I might be remembering this wrong, but I know this bit's definitely remembered right. That if you fix the sex, you often fix the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they probably go hand in hand, to be
The
honest.
physicalness, yeah. And
Um,
actually we can sometimes words get in the way, and so actually one of
yeah,
the most powerful things you can do is if you just kind of if you put your head to your partner's head and you look in their eyes, can you hold eye contact? I
yeah,
often when I've worked with couples, what some of the most powerful stuff I've done has been not around words at all and talking. It's actually been about, can you hold eye contact, can you look at one another's faces? Because actually what you get is, I can't look at you, or I giggle because it's too vulnerable. So they can't, in order to build that emotional intimacy, if that's what we want, then we can't do it because we can't be vulnerable. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'd agree, but I think there are times when couples don't have the conversations about, I'm just withdrawing, or I'm feeling uncomfortable, or um,
Yeah.
they're not they're not vulnerable enough in
Yeah.
able to have those honest conversations.
Yeah, like what kind of sex do we like here? And has this got boring? Do we want to use sex toys? I like it when you do this, or I like it when you do that.
You
Actually,
just
if you don't know
move
how
over
to pleasure
slightly.
yourself,
Yes, yeah,
how do you help somebody else know what you I want? Actually, it's interesting because uh power dynamics I think are really important, because a woman might not want to be told what to do in the kitchen or at home, but actually in the bedroom she may want to give up all her power and kind of be, that you take charge in this moment, because actually I don't I can just hand over to you, and yeah, in the power departments, and I can be my full passionate lively self. Am I too much for you, or can you handle it? That there's all these power dynamics that are playing out. Yeah. And
Yeah.
what do we want to do, and how do we want to experiment? Do we want to have a monogamous relationship? Often we talk about monogamous relationships, but not all couples are monogamous. And it might, some couples may have extra partners. They may have a threesome. Yeah. Yeah. It's not all just heterosexual monogamy out there. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And I think there's something very much leading on to that about permission
Yeah.
and having boundaries.
Yeah.
And whatever it is, whether it's about sex with your partner, or whether you're saying we're going to invite somebody else, or we're going to actually have sex outside, you've got to or if you're going to have sex that's a bit more adventurous, you've got to have the boundaries, and it's got to feel safe.
Yeah.
And
What are we comfortable with? What are we not comfortable with?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but sometimes it's not, and then someone, one or the other, feels they're not comfortable, but they can't tell their partner that that particular whatever it was
Yeah.
isn't feeling okay. So there's a lot
Absolutely.
to talk about there. And I think when we were talking just now, when you were saying that that boring bit, and I think sometimes that we get into ruts and it becomes just not just transactional conversations, which is a lot I see with the couples I work with, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you do too. But there's also that they come home from work and all they do is spew out their day, and then they never talk about anything else. It's, oh, I've had a dreadful day, and guess what so and so did, and what that happened, and that's been shit, and that becomes then, well, where's the relationship?
Yeah.
And I say, well, that's fine, because we do need to offload, but let's, instead of having rant times together, what about setting a boundary around that and saying, I need to rant for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that okay? And then, all right, now what we're going to do? Because otherwise it just spills over, and that takes, I know it did it in one of my relationships, it just, that was it. But there was actually, now I'm going to go into that, there was a there was something about why I would talk about work, or I'd talk about certain things, because it stopped him bullying me.
Right.
It was avoidant, it was a distraction.
Yeah.
So I just think that's another part of it though. So what are we avoiding when we had those conversations?
Yeah. The vulnerabilities, and also as well, um people may or may not know, but I'm a play therapist, so I study play. And actually, when I'm working with couples, it's often about how do you play? How do you play together? My partner and I, in my last relationship, we used to play squash together, and there was so much fun in like having how battles were after on court. Um, yeah, how do you play together? And so couples that play together are more likely to stay together. How do you play? How do you have fun? How do you find joy? Is it dancing together? Yeah. Yeah. Is it play fighting that turns into something else? We see that in the movies, don't we? Oh, yeah, but yeah, your fitness instructor suddenly, yeah, and actually something locks. So there's all these different ways to communicate and connect that we miss. I think we can't talk about sex and Esther Perel without talking about her book. Esther wrote the book, Mating in Captivity, about relationships, and having sex in kind of long-term relationships. It's just come into my head. It's kind of called, I think it's called the Madonna and Hall complex. That actually, as I get into, I've seen this happen quite a few times. If someone, let's go with a male and a hetero couple. So he gets into a relationship and he really likes this girl, and then as they start to get it together and he starts to care for her more, he then can't have sex because actually I once I care about you, I need to take care of you, and then my sex drive disappears. So it's kind of all Madonna, call it Madonna and Hall, because actually, whilst I don't know you very well, I can have sex with you, but then as I take care of you, I don't then see you as I'm going to use it. I don't see as you as somebody to fuck. I just want to take care of you, and so it becomes a bit platonic and looking after. Remember working with one couple around intimacy issues, and he had a mom that was always depressed, and he always had to look after her. And so that looking after get kind of spilt into the relationship, that I just need to take care of you, and like she's not a china doll. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd add another one into that is when woman's had a baby. There
Yeah.
is I'm
Yeah, your body's changed.
Yeah, but if a man, what not only
Mhm.
my Basil,
The cuteness, you can't, when Bazzy comes on screen, nobody can concentrate. It's like cuteness, your brain just shuts down, doesn't it? It has that
yeah.
impact.
So I'm sorry, Basil, but I am going to talk about take the distraction away from here. But it is when when a woman's pregnant, her partner may feel he's got to take care of her because of the baby. You're
Yeah,
precious. I don't want to hurt you, so I'm scared of having sex with you. Men could get turned off by their partners being pregnant, and
yeah. All turned on.
they get turned off. That could mean that they just don't want to have sex
Yeah,
anymore. Watching their partner give birth can give like, whoa, this is scary stuff. And look, I fucked you there, but actually look, the
yeah,
baby's born from there.
yeah,
And that turns into the Madonna versus the whore,
yeah,
because now you're the mother. You're the mother. I can't fuck the mother figure.
yeah, yeah.
So that all of this is woven into it, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about other things that affect libido or sex drive, and things like depression. If you're in chronic survival mode, and you're knackered and you're depressed, or very anxious, then what the body does is it shuts down that sex drive. So we don't have a sex drive. Certain medications are known also to affect libido and sex drive. So those
Mm,
also can impact on the lack of sex drive. I also think the relationship with ourselves has to be kind of brought in here, because if you haven't ever, I guess, embraced your own sexual self, that you have needs, desires, and it can be, and lust, then we don't get to good sex, because if I've got to have the lights off, or I'm worrying about whether I've got I remember working with a client and you really haven't embraced your inner slut, have you? And she was like, no. And I was, yeah, I'm worrying about whether my bum's too big, or and boy and guys too, that
yeah.
they also will be worrying about the size of their anatomy. And so actually, yeah, if you haven't embraced your sexual self, I often ask couples when I'm working with intimacy, like, is there anybody on the telly that you fancy? Yeah. Is there a pop star or a movie star that you'd be like, yeah, I would? Yeah. If who's your free pass out for the night? Is it Chris Hemsworth? Is it, I don't know, Cheryl Cole? I can't. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, I was struggling then for the females. And actually, if you got them, what would you want to do with them? And then so we bring them into their sexual fantasies. What kind of sexual fantasies do you have if you take your partner away? And can you bring those into the relationship? Yeah. So actually, people, it's okay to have a sexual fantasies. Yeah. We don't
Yeah.
talk about that we're allowed to have fantasies, and actually some fantasies may stay in our head, and we may talk about them with our partners. Not every sexual fantasy that's in our head do we actually want to play out. Yeah. Because actually the reality between being tied up um
Mm.
uh, uh, and uh, and fucked by a police officer that comes to give you a parking ticket, that might be a fantasy, but the reality of that actually would be quite scary. So the fantasy world and the normal world, sometimes they marry up. Yeah,
Mm.
actually I might, I'm going to share this one. We met in a bar, and my partner and I, after work one time, and we thought it would be funny to like chat each other up like we hadn't met, because there were people around us,
Yeah.
and they were like, they didn't know we were married. we'd seen it in a movie a long time ago, and we just thought it was fun. So you lots of stuff you can do, to bring in some playfulness and liven up what isn't working. But the fundamentals of, am I pissed off with you?
Mm.
Are you pulling your weight in this relationship? Are gonna be massive. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Um, I want to bring into something else about erogenous zones
yeah,
because so many people think there are only the genitals are the only erogenous zones, but that's so wrong. Um,
yeah,
and I remember watching a program. It was years ago now. I brought it up with a client the other day. Um, I watched this program with a guy. He'd become paralyzed from the waist down.
yeah.
And so what they did was they arranged for him to have a sex therapist,
Mm-hmm.
but she was a hands-on sex therapist. And he was absolutely devastated because once he'd had his accident, he said, I was a stud. I was the best at sex. I had the best sex ever. I could do everything. Nothing is ever going to work again. So he had this session with his sex therapist. Why I say sex worker? And obviously didn't show it on the program, but afterwards he said that was the best sex I've ever had in
Wow.
my life
Yeah,
because she was lighting up all those areas.
yeah,
I mean, I I say, well, you can stroke your hand and you could go like that, and that, well, your hand's been touched. But when you touch your hand really gently, you can actually feel all your nerve endings being
yeah.
touched. And when you do that, you really notice, well, where else what might feel quite erogenous, might feel really sexy, might switch some of those lights on. And
Sometimes
that's
I
the
think it's
thing.
about slowing down and it can be speeding up, but it can also be about slowing down and exploring, can't it?
Yeah,
And when couples have been having sex for a long time, it can be predictable that they're in the same pattern. So what
yeah,
happens if we have sex in a different place?
yeah,
If we always have sex in bed, what about if we have it in the kitchen? What happens if we're turned on, if you're sitting on the kitchen counter? Yeah.
yeah,
You might, it's harder if you've got children around, of course. But actually sex in the car.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's
This,
bringing that
yeah,
excitement. But I just think it is. Well, we've only got those erogenous zones, and if I just tweak your
yeah.
nipple, you're going to be turned on. Nah, and
No.
that's what gets missed. And I think
Yeah.
it is on both sides. Well, what is it? What might feel nice? What might feel different? What might be, as you say, in a different place, a different time, a
And this
different.
is the communication between couples, isn't it? Like, if you only snog me when you want to fuck me, then maybe I'm not. Maybe that's like, oh yeah, what you after? And so actually, yeah, how do we communicate this to our partners? Actually, I might want to wear a blindfold, or I might want to put blindfold on you. Maybe I want to handcuff you to the bedpost, actually, but no, that makes me feel too vulnerable. I don't want to be in that space,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. So actually, these conversations around, what we do, what we'd like to have done. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who she and her husband they own two sex shops in Brighton because I that
Mhm.
area that I live in, you're further up country. Um,
I like Brighton though. I'm like, where are they?
and one is a kind of more gentler, they have gentler
Yeah.
ways, but the other one is for those who are more adventurous. But I've been into one of them and I've gone around and it's lovely because there are all kinds of people in there and they might just want to buy a pack of cards or a mug, or they might want to look at different costumes dressing up.
Yeah.
But it's such a lovely friendly place. I've been in there and met her several times in there. But they also own a dungeon which
Yeah.
they rent out, and it is that place where people can actually go and explore things and try things out.
Yeah.
And you just think, well, why would it, And I've talked to friends about it, and they've gone, oh, that sounds really a bit. Oh no, I couldn't do that. And I just think,
And
but
they're a bit vanilla, aren't they? There's this term of vanilla, isn't there? It's a bit vanilla. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
and I understand the scaredness of it. Or what do we talk about sex toys? It seems a bit off limits, or it's a bit,
Yeah,
oh, you know, that, oh no, only certain people do that, or I couldn't do that. But, but why not? Why is there
exactly. We don't
such,
talk about masturbation, pleasuring ourselves.
yeah,
And I think we should bring in sex workers. I've worked on sex worker projects in the past. Some people will pay for sex.
yeah,
And females as well as males. I've known professional women who don't have partners, who have actually they don't want to hook up with some drunk guy in a bar, and
mm,
so they have an arrangement. So our sexual needs may be met in relationships, they may be met in other ways.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. I agree, and I think there's room for every kind of area, but it just is. I think what we wanted to do is just start that conversation and open it up and say, "Come on, why are we so prissy? Why are we so embarrassed? Why are we?" Because without sex, neither of you, or I, or anybody watching this would be here.
exactly. Yeah. And I think that's actually we haven't talked about that, but actually what happens when sex isn't about pleasure and desire? What about when it becomes about making babies? I met a couple once and they were trying to relive liven up their sex lives. And actually they had actually they'd been trying to get pregnant for such a long time and hadn't, that their sex life had just become around pregnancy. And
Yeah,
so they decided, after some failed attempts, that they just wanted to have sex for pleasure again, not just to create a baby. So I think if there is like, if it becomes about, this time's when I'm fertile and we're going to have babies, then that also can be a massive killer for sex
yeah,
drives.
absolutely. And I think the same with the IVF, because that is such a, uh,
A huge roller coaster of
it is,
hope
yeah.
and disappointments.
And
Yeah,
it's appointments, it's injections, it's all kinds of things. And I think that could kill that passion,
yeah,
I think, completely.
yeah. I
That,
wonder whether we're also, as we're talking about kind of IVF and babies, fear of being pregnant or
yeah,
awkwardness or conversations around contraception.
yeah. And there's, yeah, a lot. And I agree. There's some men who I will never wear a condom. I don't wear a condom. You'll have to take care of the whole situation. And then you come into that kind of resentment. Well, why do I always have to? Why do I have to do that? Why can't you? And those kind of conversations don't happen. It's just, oh, I'm not doing it, or you can do it, or whatever the thing is, and becomes a thing rather than becoming a pleasure again.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So many things that enter into this, isn't there? So many things.
There
And
is how you keep that dynamic alive if it's a long-term relationship, and how we navigate our sex lives if we're not in a relationship, or we're dating. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. And that, yeah.
yeah, and I think that is a place for one night stands. There is a place for casual sex. There is a place for all of those things, different
Yeah,
kinds of relationships.
let's go the whole gambit. There's swingers clubs, there's nightclubs where you pick somebody up, take somebody home. It all
Yeah,
happens.
it
Yeah,
does, but I think it's only and saying, well, for a woman especially, it's not shaming. And again, we've talked about shame, but it is about that whole thing, isn't it? This we feel shame that how it been. Of course, you've got to take responsibility for yourself. You've got to be careful. Um, no one wants to get raped, whether that's a guy or a woman. So
yeah,
there is safety around it. But why do we have to feel bad that we just wanted sex? What's wrong with that?
yeah, yeah. It's a absolutely human need, to have a sex drive and to have desire, and to feel desire. Some people have a higher sex drive than others because they're healthier, they're weller, and or some people may not because they're depressed or their medication. So many things can affect our desire for sex or intimacy, because we keep
Mm,
we're talking about sex, but just intimacy as well. It doesn't always have to be full penetrative sex, does it? Held hand
definitely
in,
not.
quick snog. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And I notice so often that in committed relationships that one of the partners will have a higher sex drive than the other. And
yeah.
it's how do you manage that? How do you deal with that? Yeah, what do you do about that if you've got a higher sex drive than your partner? Because again, it can become resentful, it could become a power struggle, all sorts of things can enter into it. Doesn't mean that one's got a health issue, but we're all different.
Yeah, and how do we talk about that? How do we navigate that? And also, how do we make space for to meet in the middle somewhere? You know, if somebody's too tired all the time to have sex and they're
Mm,
busy with the kids, then what can you do to lighten that load and also create more erotic space? Yeah.
yeah.
How do you help your partner feel desired, sexy? And without the pressure of actually
Mm,
without that actually it's just all about me. Yeah,
mm.
yeah,
Yeah, because it can become that. It can be, well, that's all you want, or that's all I want, losing that sense of closeness and connection.
yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to navigate. But I think it is being able to communicate in whatever way. I don't think you have to sit down and have this deep, meaningful conversation. It isn't always appropriate. Sometimes, as you say, people we don't talk. Sometimes it's writing a letter to each other. Maybe it's sometimes texting can be a bit tricky because that's so one-dimensional, but finding a way to be able to communicate your needs and be able to reach out to each other when it might feel just a little bit too we're allowing ourselves to be a little bit too vulnerable and we're a bit scared or embarrassed
I
even.
think there's lots of um probably I don't want to talk about it that go on around. How do I tell you I either don't want to have sex with you or I want more sex, yeah, or different sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, having those very kind of what may appear very vulnerable conversations because I'm not supposed to ask for anything or I can't want anything or need anything or not want anything. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
And I think there's something else I'd like to bring into it as well is also those aids to enable us to have sex, such as there are some men that I work with that use Viagra
yeah.
and they're in relationships and I remember their partners can get quite upset if they don't know why they're using it, but what's wrong with that? I think as long as you're open about it and saying, look, I feel more pleasure, but I feel better about myself if I feel I can have an erection for a longer time and
Yeah,
I can pleasure you better. And
yeah,
then there's also women who I can't I yes, my vagina is not lubricating as it should. There are plenty of lubricants around. And I think
absolutely.
it's just actually exploring those things rather than say, oh, I can't have sex, can't have sex, because there's something about if you don't use it, you lose it. And I
Yeah,
think there's something about that.
yeah,
So when people say, oh, I can't, especially women who've been through the menopause, oh, that's it. I don't lubricate anymore. Well,
yeah,
hold on a minute. We're in a society now where anything's available.
yeah.
Go online and check it out. And there are all types of different lubricants. One may not suit, one may, but you could bring that into the fun of it or the enjoyment of it.
And
So,
sometimes I think if there is something that isn't working, then that can be personal. That can lead into like if someone has got a history of sexual kind of maybe oh God, my words are gone. You can't get it up. I was using the posh words.
yeah,
Erectile
erectile
dysfunction.
dysfunction. Yeah.
If there's a history of that, with an anxiety around performance,
Mm.
then a partner can think that's about them, that you don't find me sexy, when actually it's not. It's about actually I also remember working with a couple where that actually he'd been bitten.
Oh,
Yeah, he'd had a blowjob where someone had bitten him, and so his anxiety then around, that you're not going to be gentle with me. If something's gone wrong, it can
Yeah,
bring in an anxiety that it's going to happen again. So there's all these little things, or actually, there's quite a large thing that might
it
be
is.
getting in the way. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
the shaming of the other person. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? You're not getting
yeah.
aroused. What's wrong with you? Well, that's enough to make anybody just
Yeah, if we're not,
relax.
if we can't be patient and we can't be compassionate and explore this stuff, and how can we make it different? How can we make it less triggering? How can you trust again? Then they are all difficulties. I
Mhm.
also, I was just, oh, my brain's just gone again. I was just trying to think of something and it's gone. Help me out, Wendy.
Well, I guess there's the other side of it. If your partner's not getting aroused, you can feel there's something wrong with you,
Yeah,
and I think that's where the communication breaks
yeah,
down because, oh well, if you don't get aroused, then it's me. You don't fancy me. You don't find me
yeah.
attractive.
Rather than our own internal blocks. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
So I think there's, there are, yeah, as we talked about, there's a multitude of things that can crop up. And I think there are that get in the way. With couples who've got children, or what if the children come in, or what if they wake up? I think young parents of young children, when they're sleepless nights, we can't make a noise, or
yeah. Then you might have
going
to
to
have
wake your
sex when the
baby.
kids are at at sitters, or when they're at school. I'm also thinking about intergenerational couples that live with other family members where there isn't much
Yes,
space for erotic
yeah,
play or sex or intimacy, because you never have that space for it.
yeah.
Yeah,
And how can you have sex in your parents' home?
yeah,
There's all of that comes into it, doesn't
yeah,
it? So there's a lot of things that can interrupt or
yeah.
cause issues, and I think just noticing those things that can cause that concern and worry and get a block. And I think we've covered quite a few today. I'm sure
We're
there's plenty more.
We have, and I'm aware that we're doing this at the end. It's Friday, it's the end of the week. We've both had busy practices. I'm also living with quite a lot of trauma. So yeah, my brain feels tired today. I'm
Yeah,
owning that I started with high energy and my brain's gone a little tired today. Where are you at, Wendy?
yeah, I feel the same. As I shared with you earlier on in the day, it's been one of those days where maybe I shouldn't have got out of bed because just a myriad of things just seem to go wrong. I'm okay, but yeah, I'm tired too. So yeah, and I think again, just noticing that for each other and what we're
Yeah.
tired and naming it and saying, yeah, there are times when I can't get the words out, I can't think straight.
Yeah, I notice when my brain's tired, I live with post-traumatic stress. I hate calling it a disorder response. Yeah, and
Mm,
it's not, brain's a little bit fatigued right now. And I can tell because my speech starts to change a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's harder to form the words as my brain
Gives me a chance to
fatigues.
say something.
Baz is here. What
Yeah.
are you going to say, Baz? Probably he wants his dinner.
Probably.
It's dinner
And he's bored
time.
with the conversation as well, you can see.
Yeah, it's like I'm just sat here actually hoping you'll hurry up and shut up so I can go get my grub, to be fair. It's about
And
time
where's
for
Polly
dinner.
then? Where's Polly?
She's on the other chair. I'm in my therapy room. So they have to take it in turns, and who's on mommy's lap. So yeah. Um, shall we wrap up there for
Yeah, let's wrap it
that's a
up for
good place
today
for
because we're
us to
both
leave it
feeling a
for
bit tired.
today and go
Yeah.
feed the fur babies. Yeah, but Polly's just looked up. She's like, yeah, food. Yeah, hungry sausage dogs.
Okay,
Yeah,
so anyone who's listening or watching, thank you. And if you've got anything you want to ask us, yeah, you've got our details and
yeah,
feel
drop
free
us
to
a
do it.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and put some comments in there or contact us outside of this. There's not a problem at all. We're always happy to help. But thank you. Thank you for thanks for chatting as well, Mel. Appreciate
And
it.
you too, Wendy, and for everyone listening. Bye for now.
Bye.